Hey fellow mathematicians! In this video, we're going to talk about how to add and subtract integers. Before we can add and subtract integers, we need to know what integers are. Integers are just whole numbers and their opposites. You might already know that whole numbers start at 0 and just count by ones. So 0, 1, 2, 3, so on and so forth. When we think about their opposites, that would be the negatives. So -1, -2, -3, so on and so forth. So integers include all the way from -infinity to infinity, just counting by ones. So -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so forth. For this number line, I just wanted to show you how you could think about 0 splitting up your integers with negative integers on the left-hand side of 0 and positive integers on the right hand of 0. You can recognize negative integers or negative numbers in general because they have the negative sign in front. Because we use positive numbers so often, we don't typically put the plus sign in front of them to show positivity. We just understand that it's positive. Just like when we talk about x in math, we know that's 1x. It's just an understood 1. So just remember that integers can be negative, like -123 or -56. 0 is really special because it's not positive, it's not negative, it's just non-negative. And then we have positive numbers as well. And those are going to be whole numbers and their opposites. We can also talk about something called absolute value, which you might have already heard about. That is just your distance from 0. And when you're thinking about distance, it's always positive. So the absolute value of any number is also going to be positive, and the symbol is 2 vertical bars. So the example here is the absolute value of -2 equals 2, and the number line shows that -2 is 2 units from 0, so that distance is 2, which is why our absolute value is positive 2. Okay, so please keep that in mind as we continue on. We're going to learn how to add integers first. And there are actually some real-life examples of adding integers, like scoring points in basketball, earning money, or maybe taking off on an airplane because you're adding height from you and the ground. So let's take a look at our first example adding integers. Example 1. We know we're going to have whole numbers or their opposites because those are what integers are. So this example says that we want to add the integers 3 and 2. So 3 plus 2. Pretty easy. You might already know the answer is just 5 because that's something we've seen maybe in elementary school. Speaking of elementary school, I was taught to add by putting these little dots on the numbers. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and that gives me 5 dots that I counted. And you could also think about it as the number line starting at 3 and then adding 2 units, kind of skipping or hopping 2 units that way, which is an okay method to do, especially when the numbers aren't too far apart. But when your numbers get further apart, that can be a little more tedious. So let's take a look at our next example, example 2. We're going to be adding integers for this one. And here we're going to solve the problem 10 plus 36. And you might just know that's 46, right? Adding tens can be a pretty easy thing to do. You can also think of it as stacking your integers if that's easier for you. So 0 plus 6 is 6, 1 plus 3 is 4, and that's how we get 46. So that's fine. The number line's a little bit more tedious because if you start at 10, I'm not trying to draw 36 little dots or count all of that. So although the number line can be useful to represent numbers and understand what's going on, it's not the most efficient way to continue adding as you move forward. So we're going to try one more example after this. And you really could use your fingers too sometimes to help you kind of keep track of what you're adding, and that's perfectly fine as well. So example 3, we have the problem 192 plus 68, and I'm going to give you one more term to add to this just to make it a little more interesting, plus 3. So when I solve a problem like this, I'm considering which numbers should I focus on first, what's going to be the easiest process. And what I first noticed is that I could rewrite this as 192 plus 8 plus 60 plus 3 and just kind of decompose the 68. And the reason why I personally think this is helpful here is that I know 2 plus 8 is 10. So 192 plus 8 is 200, 60 plus 3 is 63, and then 200 plus 63 is 263. And so it's perfectly fine to decompose or rearrange things to make you be able to make sense of these numbers in your head without having to go to pen and paper or going to your calculator. So that's just a personal preference for how I try to manipulate the problem to help me better understand in my head. Talking about subtracting integers, you could think of real life examples of losing yards on the football field, owing somebody money, or descending from your flight and losing that height or altitude. So we're going to take a look at subtracting integers. And really, when you subtract integers, what you could do is think about it as addition, right? You're just adding a negative instead. And I find that a lot of people really like that process. So we're going to take a look at the problem 4 minus 3. You might already just know this is 1, which is great. That's the great first start. You could also think about it as like counters, these little dots. So we have four positive circles, and then we're going to have 3 negative circles, which I'm going to represent with red circles. So again, we're doing 4 plus negative 3. And what we do with these little dots is we're trying to pair them up, because one positive circle and one negative circle cancel each other out to 0. And so I'm just kind of crossing through all the pairs I can find and seeing what I'm left with. I'm left with one green circle, which means 4 plus negative 3 is 1. And that's positive 1. It's understood to be positive, so we don't need to put the plus sign in front. And this idea of the positive pairing with the negative can be really helpful, I think, when you're simplifying problems. Notice that the absolute value of 4 is 4, and the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Since 4 is bigger than 3, we know that our answer should have the sign of 4. So if you're adding or subtracting terms that have the same sign, your answer is going to have the same sign. But if they're different signs, your answer will have the sign of the larger absolute value. So example 2 is the reverse of what we just did, 3 minus 4, which can be rewritten as 3 plus negative 4. So we're going to do the same idea with the green and the red circles to help us. This time we have 3 green circles because we have a 3 that's positive, and then we have 4 red circles because we have negative 4. We're going to pair up our green and reds and see what we're left with. And we're left with 1 red circle, which means our answer is negative 1. This should make sense to you with the sign, just like we talked about. The absolute value of 3 is 3. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4. 4 is greater than 3, so we know our problem's answer should have the sign of our negative 4, which means we're going to have a negative answer. And our final example, subtracting integers, is going to have multiple terms. I might sneak some addition in there as well, because essentially we're treating subtraction like addition anyway. So our example is going to be negative 5 minus 27 plus plus 8 minus 17. So negative 5 minus 27 plus 8 minus 17, where do we get started? Well, first we want to treat this as addition. So negative 5 plus negative 27 plus 8 plus negative 17. And I just find putting parentheses helps me not blur the plus and minus sign. That's a personal preference. You don't have to do that. And now I'm just going to work on combining. I think I'll start with the negative 5 and negative 27, and then I'll also do the 8 and negative 17, kind of in the same step, but separately in my head, if that makes sense. So first I'm going to focus on what is negative 5 plus negative 27. I know it's going to be a negative answer because both terms are negative, so they'll have the same sign. And then I'm thinking, well, 5 and 27, that's going to add up to 32. So I have a negative 32 plus, and we have 8 plus negative 17, I know my answer is going to be negative because the 17 is greater than 8. And so we'll take the sign of the larger absolute value. So I'm thinking, okay, 8 plus negative 17, I could just do like 17 minus 8, get that 11, and then put the negative in front like I'm supposed to. And finally, we have negative 32 plus negative 11. Same sign means negative answer, and that adds up to negative 43. So just remember that we want to treat subtraction like addition. If you're adding two numbers with the same sign, your answer has the same sign. And if you're not, take the sign of the larger absolute value. Thanks for watching, and I hope this video is helpful in you learning how to add and subtract integers. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and leave me a comment to let me know what you'd like to see me explain next. And I'll calc you later.